Thank you everybody for coming. We're going to jump right in and get moving. There's a lot of really important stuff to share with everybody, but there's even more important actions to be taken. And so with that, Secretary Gadara is going to get us started. So thank you.
Good morning. I'm Amy Gadara. Good morning. Thank you. Secretary of Education for Governor Youngkin. Before I begin, I want to just note the fact that we have some very special people with us today. First of all, I want to thank our partners in the General Assembly for taking the time to be here today. We appreciate your partnership and the leadership that you have, and I'd love to have you all stand up as I call out your names. So, Chairwoman Roxanne Robinson, Delegate Mike Cherry, Delegate Ellen Campbell, Senator Ryan McDougall, and former Speaker Kirk Cox, of course, as well. Thank you for your leadership. I also want to make sure that we celebrate our leaders of our school divisions who are here today. I know this is an incredible busy time, and I so appreciate the time that you've taken to be here when you have school divisions to run to be part of this important announcement. We're going to be focusing on action, as the governor said, and nothing is more important than your leadership at this moment. So thank you, and I'd love to have you all stand up and be recognized. Many of you may remember a somber event that we hosted last year when we released the results of the National Assessment for Educational Progress. Those spring 22 test scores show that fourth graders in Virginia had the largest learning loss in the nation in both reading and in math. Today, we are here to discuss the 23 results for our Standards of Learning test. And as you will hear, these assessment results once again underscore the negative impact of prior administration's policies that lowered expectations, kept our children locked out of schools for far too long, and conditioned many of our students to think that they do not need to be in school. The data is overwhelming. Across the country, schools that stayed shuttered the longest have seen the largest learning loss. And Virginia kept her schools closed longer than 43 other states. The tragic result of missing that much invaluable learning time is achingly clear across our Commonwealth. The previous administration's failure to prioritize opening schools created a culture that lowered expectations, not only around academics, but also around homework and attendance. Our children are paying the price for those decisions today. Our students have fallen off track, and they are struggling. They are struggling developmentally, they're struggling emotionally, and they're struggling academically. It is challenging for them to catch up and master content and skills that they never had the chance to learn, and it is now harder than ever for them to build upon an academic foundation which they never had a chance to develop. The bright spot in this dark moment is that we know what works. We need to look at proven best practices that can provide hope and guidance for our learning recovery efforts here in the Commonwealth. Data shows that high-intensity tutoring that provides additional time on critical content increases student learning and accelerates achievement gains. We also know that attendance matters. Common sense tells us that students have to be in school to learn, and that a screen is a poor substitute for making learning come alive. It turns out the data makes it undeniable. Students need to be in school. It is now time for Virginia to be all in for our kids. We need to raise our expectations, and we need to use the tools and the resources which we know work to get our students back on track for success. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment. To serve as many students as quickly and as efficiently and effectively as possible, we need communities to come together and support is what is going to be happening in our schools through tutoring and mentoring. Churches, business, colleges, fraternal organizations, libraries. We need everyone to rally around the plan we're going to announce today and take action for our students. This is the time to be all in Virginia. It is now my pleasure to introduce our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. Lisa Coons, who will present our Standards of Learning scores for the year. Dr. Coons.
Thank you, Secretary Gadara. I appreciate you starting with the 2022 NAEP results that were released last year. Those showed a consequential drop in Virginia's performance from 2017 to 2022. We also had an event that occurred in 2018 through 2022 in which the past administration reduced the proficiency cut scores and changed what it meant to be proficient in our SOL assessments. In addition, we're here today to talk about the dramatic drop in our grade 3 through 8 reading and math scores and demand that we have to take actions together. As Secretary Gadara said, it is an all-in moment, and it's an all-in moment for all of us to wrap around our grade 3 through 8 math and reading students. Finally, what we're seeing is our high school students are starting to bounce back. They are starting to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, and they are showing progress. And finally, as Secretary Gadara said, it makes common sense. If students come to school, they do better. But what we're seeing pre-pandemic and post-pandemic is a doubling in chronic absenteeism. That's an education word. It means that students miss 18 or more days a year. That's just 2 days a month. So if a student misses 2 days a month, 18 days a year, they are more likely to perform 25% less in mathematics and 18% less in ELA. As we have discussed, our performance in NAEP, which is our national benchmark, our only comparison to Virginia performance to other states across the nation, shows that between 2017 and 22, we fall furthest behind in 4th grade reading and 4th grade math. But we also know that the way NAEP reports proficiency is much lower than the way the SOLs report proficiency. But I want us to focus on that yellow line that you see on the chart. That yellow line indicates the change in proficiency cut scores that the past administration made. What they did is they made it easier to pass the SOL test. They lowered the passing rate 2 to 4 points. And by lowering the passing rate 2 to 4 points, more students passed. And that has caused a dramatic situation in our student data. You will see in 2018-19, before the pandemic, with those rigorous cut scores, you will see that 76% of our students passed their reading SOL in grades 3 through 8. But if you look at the first administration after the SOL, the pass scores changed. So students who wouldn't have been proficient were proficient. And you see in those tan bars, those students who actually would have failed if we had used the same cut scores in 2018-19. As a result, that covered a group of children who were at risk for failure in failing, and we thought they were doing okay. Their families, the schools, their teachers, all thought those students had met the expectations, but actually they were meeting lower expectations and needed more support, which is why in 2022-23, we really only have 1 in 3 students proficient in reading. If we look at 2018-19, we have 1 in 3 students who we are calling proficient who probably are not because they met that lower expectation, and then we have a third who are in that failing category. That is a significant change in our post-pandemic performance and a call to action to support our children in reading. You will see the same thing in mathematics. You will see that we have that gap between students in that post-pandemic change of cut scores that are actually appearing proficient that are not. And you'll see that 2/3 of our students in mathematics this year are not meeting the same expectations as their pre-pandemic peers. We actually only have 34% of our students who would meet that same proficiency rating. And it gets more startling as we start to look at our student groups. As we know, our student groups are behind. They were behind before the pandemic. They have lower proficiency scores in grades 3 through 8 before the pandemic, and now that gap is widening. If you look at the gap in reading between all students and the gap between Black students and Hispanic, we continue to fall, and we are widening the results. In mathematics, that's even more startling. When we look at all students, they have dropped 15 percentage points, but our Black and Hispanic students have dropped 20 percentage points. So they're falling further and further behind, both in reading and mathematics. As we look at economically disadvantaged students, and we look at our English learners and our students with disabilities, only 3 in 10 of our English learners passed their proficiency rating last year. That is with those lowered cut scores. Only 4 in 10 of our students with special needs passed their performance rating. So not only is it our Black and Hispanic students, but our students who have other challenges like English learning, like economically disadvantaged, and our students with disabilities. So we have to support our students, but we have to support our students who are most fragile. In high school, we're seeing a bit of a different story. In high school, we're seeing our students start to bounce back. So if you look at our 2018 pre-pandemic, pre-COVID rates, and you look at 22-23, we are seeing improvements and we are seeing growth. I will mention that those proficiency cut scores did drop in high school as well, so we need to continue to work with our high school students and watch their growth and make sure they maintain their improvement, but it is not as a dramatic situation as our grade 3 through grade 8 students. So what we know is that our students aren't meeting proficiency in pre-pandemic worlds. They are not performing like their pre-pandemic peers. And as we change those cut scores, we thought our students were coming back in grade 3 through 8 much better than they were, and they are not. We have 1 and 2 students in reading who are behind their 2018-2019 peers and are not ready to move forward, with 2/3 of our math students that are not there. These students need us all in now. Our schools and our educators need our support and need everybody to come together to support our children who need our help recovering from the learning loss of the pandemic. We also know, as Secretary Gadara said, that attendance matters. It's simple. If students come to school, they do better. And we at the Department of Virginia have talked with our superintendents, our business chambers, and launched the campaign Attendance Matters VA. It is very important for us all to talk about how students need to come to school. During COVID, it was okay to keep students home. They learned on a laptop. They learned at home. We sent the message that it was okay to be at home. And now they're trained to learn from home. And we have to change that mindset, and we have to change that culture as a community and expect our children to come to school. Because if we look at the data speaks for itself around our students coming to school. In 2018-19, 1 in 10 students were absent. In 2022-23, that number has doubled. So if you think across the room, 1 in 10, now we are 1 in 5 students not coming to school, at least at the minimum expectation around chronic absenteeism. And when we look at the impact, if a student misses 18 or more days, they drop 18% compared to their peers in their reading scores. But if they miss 27 days, they're only 47% likely to pass their reading score. And as you see in that trajectory, it gets worse the more days we miss. But even more startling, if you look at mathematics, the ability to come to school and be at school every day makes a world of difference in mathematics. It makes sure that students are learning. So as we're watching students drop and coming to school, that is a 1-to-1 correlation to the drops that we are seeing in academic performance. And most importantly, let's talk about those student groups again. Those student groups who were behind before the pandemic, that fell further behind during the pandemic, those are the students we need to support the most in coming to school, because you can see the gaps, the large gaps that are widening in those student groups about not coming to school. It is essential that we wrap around the idea of attendance and that we come together to ensure that every child comes to school every day. And last but not least, we need to remember that our 3rd through 8th grade students are not ready. They are behind where their pre-pandemic peers were. They are not performing where they were in 2018-19, and the gap has been widened. And we have said that we are okay, but looking at the change in cut scores from the past administration, we know that we are not. And we know that 1 in 2 students are not reading on level, and they need support. And 2 in 3 students are not ready to perform mathematics on grade level, and they need an all-in approach, a dramatic approach from all of us to support our students, our families, and our educators to help us recover from the learning loss of the pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Coons, for walking us through our students' attendance and achievement data. We have a lot of work to do. And the bipartisan budget deal provides a critical infusion and helps us with that work by providing $418 million to tackle student learning loss, and to get our students back on track as quickly as possible. Thank you again for the leadership you all provided in that. We know what works. Virginia students will benefit when school divisions invest this money on the proven models and programs that produce the results that our children deserve and that they need critically. And so now, to tell us more about what we need to do and how to spend that money well, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce the 74th Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Honorable Glenn Youngkin.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you. Please have a seat. Secretary Gadara, Superintendent Coons, thank you for sharing with us, I think, another moment that reminds us that we must be investing in our children every single day. I want to thank everybody else for coming. I want to remind everyone where we came from and how we got here. First, as has been repeated, the systematic reduction in standards, reducing the number of questions that you have to get right to be determined whether you are proficient or not only undermines the learning of our children, but it makes the data nearly impossible to assess. Pre-cut score reductions, post-cut score reductions, what's comparable, what's not? And we have to work hard in order to truly understand reality. And that's what this team has done. The honesty gap is real. It is real. And the latest SOL data proves it. Second, the unnecessary closure of schools for an extended period of time, and I'm going to repeat the startling data that Virginia was 44th in the nation in getting our students back in the classroom. It not only materially impacted our students, but that learning loss is incredibly hard to recover. And in fact, our youngest students, the 3rd through 8th graders, who never had the opportunity to truly learn the foundations, those building blocks for the rest of life, they do not rebound the flip of a switch. You just heard the numbers. 2/3 of all 3rd through 8th grade students either failed or are at risk of failing their math SOLs. And more than half of 3rd through 8th grade students either failed or at risk of failing their reading SOL. 3rd grade children, 4th grade children, 5th grade children, 6th grade children, 7th grade children, 8th grade children. These are the years where these foundations are laid, where the building blocks are assembled that enable success, not just academically, but in life. And we have to get this right. And then finally, we've learned that our children and our families were taught not to be in the classroom. And they were taught that it was okay. Well, let me be clear. It is not okay. 1 in 5 students are chronically absent today, meaning they miss more than 18 days of school. Total absenteeism, as you've seen, particularly in 3rd and 8th grade, nearly doubled. The impact of that on a student's ability to achieve is not too hard to understand. You're not in the classroom, you're not going to learn it. You didn't learn it yesterday, you will not be able to build on that tomorrow. And these statistics of 25% lower scores in mathematics and 18% lower scores in reading are startling, but not unexpected. And finally, we learned who is faring disproportionately worse. Black students, Hispanic students, economically disadvantaged students,
English as second learner students, students with disabilities. Not only were all students left behind with the unnecessary closure for such an extended period of time, but these groups of students suffered more and are recovering more slowly. All of this brings to life the discussions that I've been having around the Commonwealth over the last many months in our Parents Matter listening sessions. It gives me a moment to hear from students and parents and faculty and administrators. A school administrator told me in Virginia Beach that the kids want to learn more, but their families struggle with the lack of flexibility and scheduling in traditional tutoring programs. They want to do it, they can't schedule it. A mom from Stafford shared with me that lowered standards constrained her son's God-given potential. And a student wrote a letter that sadly said that middle school is just a placeholder between elementary school and high school. So together we stand at a crossroads. And this is our time to dig in and to dig deep. We have to jolt the system. We have to do more and do it faster. See, Secretary Gadara highlighted, we know what works. We know that high-intensity tutoring works. We know that the science of reading works. And we know that being in the classroom for in-person learning as opposed to being absent in a chronic fashion works. Virginia suffered the worst learning loss in the nation during the pandemic, stemming from schools being closed and standards being masked because they were reduced and students were told that they were doing fine and they weren't. We not only have work to do, but we have to do it fast. We have to do it fast. And so I first want to recognize not just the legislators that are here, but all the legislators for sending me a budget. Yes, it was 7 months late. But they sent us a budget on a bipartisan basis. And that is something that Virginians need. And on top of the record education investment in K through 12 that we have been making, key legislators on both sides of the aisle on a bipartisan basis worked with me. And they worked with me to include in that budget $418 million of direct funding to combat learning loss and implement and accelerate the Virginia Literacy Act. That's what that money is for, and it needs to be put to work quickly. So as we announce today our All-in Virginia plan in order to drive impact, to bring everyone together, we in fact are going to be sharing and sending out a playbook on what we need to do. The playbook fosters collaboration between the Virginia Department of Education, between the school divisions, with community leaders, with parents, with students, with everyone involved in our children's lives. It focuses on an effort to fundamentally change the direction of these numbers and focuses on attendance, literacy, and learning. And for those of you that are paying attention, that spells all. It's a carefully constructed plan constituted along three key pillars. First, we are launching an intensive tutoring program. And when I say intensive, I mean intensive, focused on math and reading in the foundational years of 3rd through 8th grade, where we see the most significant damage that has been done and the most persistent learning loss. And let me walk you through a set of the key fundamentals of this intensive tutoring program. There is best-in-class knowledge on how to do this. And we know this will work. This best-in-class, high-intensity tutoring program will be for those students who are at risk of failing or who have failed. And they will receive 3 to 5 hours a week of intensive tutoring in math and in reading every week. Those students that are at risk for 18 weeks, and those students who have failed for the entire school year of 36 weeks. Small groups will participate in this with a low tutor-to-student ratio of 1 to 10. And these tutors will be the tutors that we can attract and find. Existing teachers, retired teachers, trained tutors, pastors. We need people off the sidelines working with our children. Folks, it is an all-hands moment. There'll be personal sessions that will be guided with digital tools. And let me be clear, there is no cost to a single family, not a penny, not a moment to worry. You can get access to this intensive tutoring because your child needs it. This is going to be done on a collaborative basis. The implementers of this are the school divisions. They are being empowered to use the creativity and capabilities that they all have. We are telling you this works. Do it. And we are strongly recommending that of the funds that are being sent to each division, 70% of them, so 70% of the $418 million goes to high-intensity tutoring, targeting these students that are either at risk of failing or have failed their SOLs. The second big pillar here is expanding and accelerating the reach of the Virginia Literacy Act, funding for reading specialists, extending now beyond the 3rd grade, all the way up through 8th grade. The Virginia Literacy Act is completely reforming the way we teach reading. Every child must be able to read. And these funds will accelerate and extend that necessarily up through 8th grade. The science of reading works. We've just got to go faster. And we're recommending to school divisions that of the funds that you're going to receive, approximately 20% of this should be spent on new resources accelerating and extending the Virginia Literacy Act. And while we're providing resources in order to aggressively address the learning loss coming out of the pandemic, there's one truth, that if the students aren't in school, they will not catch up. And so we, in fact, are going to be launching a chronic absenteeism and transportation task force, a task force that will convene educators, business leaders, community leaders, families, students, and anybody else who wants to be involved in figuring out how to make sure that our children are in the schoolroom. We're going to develop statewide guidance, and then we are going to tell people choose the best ways to get students in the classroom. Chronic absenteeism is not something that we are going to hope goes away. We have to take actions. We're going to track attendance. We're going to reduce chronic absenteeism with a playbook that we can share across the entire state. But on top of that, there are already great programs in action. And I want to share one with you. If you go to school in Louisa County today and you miss a day of school, you have to make it up in the classroom with a teacher. There's no substitute for in-class learning. That's a burden on everybody. And in Louisa County, under the leadership of Doug Straley, they have collectively committed themselves to not allow the students to fall behind. We're recommending that you take 10% of the allotted new funds and put it towards addressing chronic absenteeism. 70% for high-intensity tutoring. 20% to advance and accelerate the Virginia Literacy Act. 10% to address chronic absenteeism. Folks, this is a moment that we don't want to miss because our kids deserve it. If you haven't figured it out, we must be all in. We know we can do this together. We just have to make it happen. Attendance, literacy, and learning. And if we lean in, then we can in fact lift up. We lean in, we lift up. We must build a ladder towards academic achievements that's grounded in shared truths, truths that no one argues against. We have to reaffirm the importance of showing up in class. We have to start with basics and recognizing that reading and in math are the foundations of success in a classroom and in life, and that our 3rd through 8th graders need substantial help. We have to recognize the truth that parents not only have rights in Virginia, but they have responsibilities as well. And we have to make sure that parents are engaged in fulfilling their role, making sure their kids are not just in school, but they're helping them regain the learning that they lost during the pandemic. And finally, the truth that if we set high expectations for our children, they will soar. They will soar. When you walked into the building today, I don't know how many of you noticed the inscription on the wall here, the inscription that was first stated by a fellow Virginian, George Washington. A knowledge of books is the basis upon which other knowledge is to be built. It's engraved because we want everyone to not just see it, but to never forget it. We have to renew this promise. This is a moment for us to do it together. We have to renew this promise for all Virginians. It can't matter your background, your race, your socioeconomic standing, your religion. Education is the fundamental pillar to our collective future. And we have to stand up and get this done. We have a generation that is at risk. And so I challenge you. We sit here on September the 7th, and we know we must take action. And so I challenge our school leaders to get moving. I challenge you to work in a collaborative way to take these resources and invest in our children and to get the high-intensity tutoring programs up and running by Monday, October the 16th. And you didn't fall out of your chair. I know you know how to do it. The resources are being made available. Our children can't wait. Let's get going. I challenge our parents. You have the fundamental right to make decisions in Virginia with regards to your child's education, their care, and their upbringing. With those rights come responsibilities. We need you engaged. We know your lives are busy. We need you to get your kids to school. We need you to help them at night with tutoring support. We need you to call their teachers. We need you to assess how they're doing. And finally, I have a call to all our community partners. If you're a church or a synagogue, if you are in business, or you in fact have time, get engaged in tutoring our children. All of our school divisions are going to need help. They're going to need help. Time will be made available in the day, before school, after school, in the middle of school. There may be weekends. We need everybody. We need everybody. Here's our moment. Here's our moment as a Commonwealth of Virginia to stand up for the values that we hold dear. And the single value that I know we cherish the most is the future of our children. The learning loss that our kids suffered as a result of schools being shut, of being told that an education on a 12-inch screen was a quality education, the complete lack of forming the basic foundational capabilities of reading and math for 3rd through 8th graders will not go away through hope. It's going to require work. I want to thank our General Assembly again for the partnership in creating the access to funds in order to support this. And I want to thank all of the work that we're all going to do in making the bright future for our children come alive. Folks, God bless you. May God bless the work we're about to do. And friends, it's time. Let's go to work. Thank you. So,